Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our very first webinar of this academic year, 25-26. I'm Ishita Nagpal, current chair of AMA DocSIG, and I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome everyone to our very first webinar. Thank you so much for taking out the time and spending next 60 minutes with us for the webinar called The Heart of a PhD, Leading with Purpose and Perspective with Professor Maura Scott. This session is extra special to us, not just because it launches our programming for this academic year, but because it brings to life everything that DocSIG stands for, which is support, inspiration, community, and mentorship for marketing PhD students across all the journeys. To all the familiar faces that I see and to all the first-time joiners, welcome. As some of you might not be familiar with DocSIG, we are a vibrant community within American Marketing Association dedicated to empowering PhD students with resources, opportunities, and a supportive environment to help you thrive both academically and professionally. When we began planning our very first webinar, we knew we wanted to do something that is most important, which was 2 P's of PhD, like we want to say, purpose and perspective. And when we knew what we wanted to do, we started thinking who could speak to these 2 P's beautifully. And it was a no-brainer. The first name that came to our mind and our hearts was Professor Maura Scott, not just because she's an outstanding teacher, a respected scholar, a mentor to so many of us, but because she's a truly remarkable human being. I have personally been inspired by her humility, her authenticity, and I'm honored today for all of you to experience the same. So Professor Scott, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom and time with us. This means a lot. So
Thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you very much for those kind words. And it's really been such a pleasure and such a privilege to get to know you guys as we work together to put this webinar together. And I've just been so impressed with your diligence and creativity and organization. So thank you, each of you, very much for your hard work on this.
Thank you so much. Before we start, a quick housekeeping note. We encourage all of you to keep your cameras on. You know, it's always good to speak to some familiar faces and not some black tiles. So if you are comfortable, please keep your cameras on. Please stay muted during the session. If you have any questions, please send us on chat, either publicly or privately to me. We'll try our best to address as many questions as possible. And lastly, I would like to introduce my wonderful colleague and teammate, Xiaowing Feng, a PhD student from Syracuse University. She works as a vice chair of special projects and partnership at DocSIG, and we are very lucky to have her on our team and grateful for her help to bring this event to life. With that, without further ado, Xiaowing, floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. So my name is Xiaoying, and I'm a PhD candidate from Syracuse University. And currently, like Ishita introduced, I'm the Vice President of the Special Project and Partnership. And we are so glad that all of you join us like very first webinar of the new academic year today, The Heart of a PhD, leading with a purpose and perspective with Dr. Maura Scott. And in our audience today, we have students who are just freshly begin their PhD journey. And we also have someone already deep in the middle of it and at the final stage. And we also have someone approaching, like moving towards a postdoc position and also junior faculty. So no matter where you are right now, it's always valuable to pause and reset and breathe a little bit fresh air as we begin another very exciting academic year together. And let's be honest, so being on this path is not easy at all. So beyond all the courses and tons of reading you do every day and thinking about the project day and night and all the teaching service, and there are lots of moments that we wonder, are we choosing the right thing? And am I still connected to the purpose behind my research? And how do I balance my ambitions and also well-being? And these are all big reflective questions. And today we are very lucky to have Dr. Maura Scott with us, someone who has navigated this journey with wisdom and grace, and who can also help us to reflect on what it means to pursue academia with both purpose and perspective. So I'm going to have a brief introduction about Dr. Scott again. So Dr. Maura Scott, she's professor of marketing and the Edward M. Carson Chair in Service Marketing at Arizona State University. And she's currently the co-editor of the Journal of Marketing and previously served as joint editor-in-chief of Journal of Public Policy and Marketing. And right now, she's on the AMA board of director and also a fellow of Marketing Science Institute. And Dr. Scott's research focus on consumer well-being, which very relevant to like what we are going to talk about today, and also decision making, with a special emphasis on supporting vulnerable and underrepresented populations. So her work has appeared in all the top journals in our fields: JM, JMR, JCR, JAM, JCP. I wish one day I can also say that my works appear all of this journal, like in a rap way. And her work also has been featured in outlets like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and Women's Health. And she's also received numerous awards for both her research and also her mentorship, including the Society for Consumer Psychology 2024 Distinguished Scientific Contribution Award. So what really makes her present special today is the perspective she's going to bring to us. Her work is not just about advancing the theory, but also about making a real difference in people's life, including you and me. So that's exactly what we are here today to talk about: leading a PhD journey with purpose and perspective. So now I will let Professor Scott to share his short presentation before we dig into the Q&A session.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And Xiaoying, I have no doubt that you are going to have your work in all of the wonderful places and hopefully, surpass the scholars coming before you with your work. So I'm going to now share my screen, my slides, and please let me know if you can see them. Okay, super. So first of all, I just want to say again a big thank you to the DocSIG team. What an impressive group of young scholars you are, and how fun it has been getting to know you guys better. And I know this is just the beginning of the fun times that we'll share together. In terms of what I'll briefly talk about today is I'll give everybody just a little bit of background on who I am as a researcher. And then I want to talk about a topic that came up in a lot of the pre-submitted questions, which is impact and purpose. And I want to talk about how these things could go hand in hand. And then I'll turn it back to the DocSIG team for the Q&A part. Okay. So a little bit about me. My research interest since I was in your shoes as an early scholar was trying to find a way to bring together consumer and societal well-being with rigorous scholarly research. And, this is a journey for all of us. And I think it's also the privilege of this job because we're all continuing to learn to do better as we strive toward a lofty goal like this. As Xiaoying mentioned, my work is in broadly 4 areas. Very interested in bringing new voices to the discipline, especially vulnerable consumer groups, underrepresented consumer groups, because I think that this is a factor that can help elevate the quality of the discourse in our discipline and give us a chance to learn from individuals and communities who may be approaching marketing problems in different ways. I'm also quite interested in financial services and health services. And the reason I zero in on financial services and health services is that these are two foundational areas, and I would be so bold as to say human rights, that every individual needs in order to make the best contributions they can to society. And so when we don't have our health and when we don't have financial security as individuals, as communities, it's hard to be at our best and to make the contributions that are going to help make the world better. And I'm also interested in technology and services because I think that technology and services can help to facilitate these big goals. And so that's kind of a snapshot of some of the work that I'm interested in and continue to work on as a researcher. Another important area when we talk about heart, from my view, is impact. And when we think about impact as researchers, a lot of what we think about is this conversation that we're having with the scientific community through our journals and through our conferences, where we're reading the journals, we're determining how we can add to that discussion. We're making our contributions to knowledge through our conference presentations, even early on through your poster presentations, and ultimately through your published work in the journals. And this is very important because this is really the backbone of where the scholarly conversation takes place. At the same time, when we think of impact, there are numerous other paths to making impact. And that can be by using our work to help improve the quality of life of communities. And so sometimes that work can be done hand in hand with communities or with organizations, because in the end, we are business scholars. We're in business schools. So the work that we do as we try to advance well-being in an impactful way also needs to align with those organizational priorities, meaning companies still need to be profitable in order to stay in business. And so finding ways to help address those foundational organizational priorities as we pursue the things that are in our hearts as scholars is another path to being impactful. Another path is to, through our rigor, and because we have this objective, rigorous research, is we can also share that with the policy community so that policymakers can make fact-based, informed decisions when they are shaping policy that is going to affect, thousands or even millions of people. And then, of course, this can be done systematically or it can be done on a project level. And so I lay this out to say, as you are approaching your own research program and you're thinking about impact, certainly this, science impact is crucial. This is our lifeblood. But we also need to start to stretch and think about how we can reach these other areas of impact so that our work, the impact of our work, is more sustained over long periods of time. And by the way, this is the direction that our discipline is taking. If you look at AACSB, if you look at EQUIS and other entities that are these guiding forces in our field, they are also pushing us to think differently about this. And in fact, AACSB recently expanded its standards to ensure that the work that we're doing is also prioritizing societal impact. So if this is something you're passionate about, it's a great time to be in this discipline. Another path to thinking about impact is, I think, finding your people, finding your tribe. And so I think the fact that you're here at this DocSIG webinar is an outstanding first start. You're right where you need to be. I would tell you that as you think about your specific area of expertise, it might be beneficial to also join the other SIGs. So as an AMA member, you can actually join as many SIGs as you want to for free. And this is a new benefit because up until a few years ago, you actually could only, I think somebody's drawing on the slides. I'm not sure what happened there. But up until a few years ago, you would have to pay extra money to join additional SIGs. So do take advantage of that. I would also say, as you think about going to conferences, try to have a specific goal in mind in terms of what you want to get out of that conference. Make sure you're going to the doctoral symposia, whether it's an AMA conference, ACR, SCP, marketing and public policy. All of the conferences have some events that are specifically designed for doctoral students and early career scholars. And I encourage you to take advantage of that to build relationships and also to keep abreast of the state of the art expectations in the discipline. Another great way to build relationships is to go to some of the smaller conferences that may only have 200 or 300 people, because then you have a chance to have more quality time and get to know people. And also trying to get to know scholars outside of the US. If you haven't signed up for Elmar, please put that on your to-do list immediately. This is one of the best ways to find out what's going on every single week in our discipline. And so I think that's probably the broadest place to go for information about all facets of the field. But there are many different listservs, like the ACR listserv and the TCR, or Transformative Consumer Research listserv, are two that I've been involved with for a very long time. Okay, before we wrap up, I do have one piece of top secret, confidential information, just for you. And that is to find out about the people who are never getting rejected from the journals. We all want to know that secret. Well, those are only the ones who never submit their work, I'm sorry to say. All of us who are conducting research and working as hard as we can and submitting our work, some of that work gets rejected. And I can attest to the fact that I've had countless papers rejected. And so I know that that's in the list of questions that we're going to talk about. But if you're getting sometimes rejected, that it's tough, but know that you're not alone. That is part of the business we're in. And the key to success is how you deal with those rejections and how you move forward in face of very difficult feedback. So Harriet Tubman is an American hero. She's an inspiration of mine. I want you to know that you can do this. You can be successful in this field. And this is one of her quotes that I just love. She was involved in the Underground Railroad in the United States to help enslaved people escape their bondage and find freedom. And, this is something that my own ancestors went through. And she says, if you're tired, keep going. If you're scared, keep going. If you're hungry, keep going. If you want to taste freedom, keep going. And so I want to say to you, you can do this. Just, keep going and don't give up. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the DocSIG team for questions.
Thank you very much for the small presentation. And now we're moving forward. We collect a lot of submitted questions from all of you guys, and we arranged that in the below 4 topics. The first one, PhD journey and motivation, and research and publication. Also, a lot of you asked about questions about advisors and potential cooperation. And then the last one will be balance and well-being. So let's jump into the first topic. The first question under this topic is, so why did you decide to pursue an academic career? I I believe that majority of us, before we got accepted to a PhD program, already answered this question. But it's nice to revisit it again and how to stay motivated when doing research, which can be a very, very long, lonely path.
Those are both really interesting questions. I came into my doctoral program later in life, so I started my PhD program at age 33. So I had worked for a few large companies before that, 3M in Minnesota, the Dial Corporation, which makes, among other things, soap, and Motorola. And one of the things that I observed across those companies where I had the privilege of learning a great deal is that in some ways they were all trying to solve the same problem, even though they were in very different industries, which is how can we better understand what our consumers and our customers want, and how can we deliver that in a way that is going to set us apart relative to our competitors and help us meet the bottom line requirements that we need to. And so I had this desire to step back and address those questions from a broader perspective, as opposed to, this more day-to-day firefighting kind of approach. And so when I learned about the PhD project, I went to their conference and learned more about what it would be like to be a professor, and I knew that this was my calling. So I'm just super thankful to be in this field and just to get to be constantly surrounded by so many bright, passionate, creative individuals. In terms of staying motivated, it can be lonely. Like sometimes when you're pushing your work forward, especially your dissertation, which has to be your independent work, it can be challenging to keep going. And I think one way to overcome that is to build a structure in with your advisor or your committee members that allows you to have a lot of mini check-ins, even if it's just, once every 2 weeks, we're going to provide an update. So I saw a couple of the students that I advise showed up. Thank you guys for showing up. And one of the things that we do when we meet is we typically have a set typed agenda. These are the things we want to talk about, and some slides and materials. And so when I was a PhD student, I often treated my meeting with my advisor, because I was coming out of industry, like a customer meeting, meaning I knew their time was precious. I knew I was going to get like 45 minutes or an hour. So I wanted to manage everything I could control to make the time organized, recognizing that, when they finish with me, they're going into another meeting. And so I am going to have their full attention during that hour. And during that time, I want to, anything that I could have done before showing up to that room should be done so that that can be a productive conversation. And when I made that time productive for them, they were willing to continue to meet with me regularly. And so because that worked so well, that's how I continue to try to work with students and junior colleagues.
Thank you very much. And now we move to the second questions. How can doctoral scholars practically align their daily research routines with their deeper sense of purpose, especially during periods of uncertainty and or setbacks, so that their work can remain both meaningful and sustainable?
I think one way to approach this is to recognize that the things that are part of your deep sense of purpose, the things that are on your heart, are probably things that you have been also thinking about quite a lot, and that you might have some expertise and perspective that maybe the average person doesn't have, because you care about it and because you're passionate about it. And so bringing those perspectives into your research, I think can help differentiate it. If, your journey or the things you care about make you see things a little bit in a different way. For example, if you're an international student at your institution, that means that you're coming from somewhere else where things are probably done a little bit differently. And so when you come to wherever your school is and you see these differences, these are probably like things you've thought about a lot because it's affecting your life. And the folks that are in that context probably have not. And so this is a way for you to leverage this passion into a strength, I think.
Mhm. Thank you very much. And we move to the next one, which I also have problem with, how to deal with procrastination and how to deal with some emotional stress of a PhD when it's dragging down, sometimes even like subconsciously.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because I know how stressful and demanding a doctoral program can be. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of vulnerability as a PhD student. We don't get a lot of feedback. And when we do, it's typically not warm and fuzzy, when we're submitting our work to journals and we're getting that feedback from anonymous reviewers. And so it is natural to feel overwhelmed at times. And I think it is important to have an eye on it and reflect on one's well-being because the fact is, if you're not in kind of like an emotionally and cognitively good place, you're not going to be able to do your best work. So it's really key and shouldn't be underestimated. In terms of the first part of that question, which is procrastination, this is more of a practical thing. And in some ways, this is the cool part of this job because we have a lot of small pieces that we're always managing, like even with your dissertation, if you have a multi-essay dissertation, then maybe you have a couple of papers that you're working on. And so it could be with one, you're in the weeds, getting into the literature. And it can be frustrating because, you spend a couple of days going through the literature and you are amassing knowledge, but it's not that you have something tangible to show, right? It's just that now you know more than you did 2 days ago. Whereas other things, you have something concrete, like, okay, I analyze these data and now I can, make some graphs and maybe write up a method section, so it feels more concrete. I think the key is to put those things into their buckets, like you need to be always thinking about the implications of your work and your general discussion. You need to be thinking about how to make your study as rigorous as possible. You need to be in the literature. And for my work style, I find that, it's hard for me to just do one thing for days on end because I get bored. And if you get bored, then you might feel like procrastinating. And so when I get bored of doing one thing or burned out or feel like I can't do anymore, I switch to one of the other tasks. So maybe if I've been reading in the literature and I'm like, okay, enough, the words are blurring together on the page, let me go and think about my experiment and how I can make that better and work on that. Or maybe I need to think creatively about a new, more impactful outcome measure. And so rather than stepping away from the work, I would just recommend stepping to a different part of the work so that you're still moving things forward, but it's a little bit more exciting because you're switching between things. Does that help answer that one?
I think so. So we can move to the next one and let's see. It's about the topic 2, and then the first one is about learning methods because we have like we are different student in different stage, but we need to constantly learning the new method. And then someone asked this question, what is the best plan to learn methodology? Like, how can I start from where? Especially right now, if we look into the top journal, all those papers always have mixed method. Like you are not just one track doing experiment, you also need to analyze other huge data. So it's getting very challenging. So I think this question is quite relevant. And also the second coming together with this is if a hypothesis is not supported, does it indicate failure? And how can I still provide valuable insight from that?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the second one because I think that one is pretty straightforward. From my perspective, we're just always learning. And so I don't think it's a failure. There can be lots of reasons that your hypothesis isn't supported. And I think it's an opportunity to look at all of those things. Like the first one is like I primarily am an experimental researcher. And so I would want to see, did I manipulate what I intended to manipulate? So a lot of times we're pre-testing. But then when we run the study in the context, like do the manipulation checks say that we were manipulating what we thought we were? And if we don't see that that's happened, then, and that's the reason the hypothesis wasn't supported, then we've learned something. And we might need to think about how to make sure we're manipulating the intended factor. If we are manipulating what we intended and we still see that we're not finding the effect that we expect, there can still be really interesting reasons for that. Maybe there is some process variable that or moderator that we haven't thought about that can start to unpack this. Maybe we have to go back in the literature and better understand that. And I think all of that is okay when we approach it through the lens of, well, nothing's going to be perfect. We're human and we're in a social science. So we just learn. In terms of how to go about learning methods, I think this is a kind of a multi-pronged approach. All of us are going to start with coursework where we're going to get some fundamental methods training. But a lot of I can say for myself, the best training I got was when I had finally my own data and I could work with my advisors to dig into something that really mattered to me. You have these data sets that maybe, your instructor gives you in your methods course, and that's such important fundamental training, but it gets really real when you need to, be prepared to answer your advisor's questions. And so you're digging into the data that way. The other thing that's emerged is that most of the major conferences now have special sessions on specific methodological topics. So, for example, in a few weeks, I'm co-chairing the doctoral symposium at ACR. And one of the sessions that we have is basically just this. We have one session that's just on text analysis. And so I would take advantage of these programs that are designed to have specialists come in and share expertise with the discipline. Actually, most of the AMA conferences are doing this as well by now.
I think so. If like in the future we're gonna go to the winter AMA and also summer AMA, we all see like lots of special session about some newer methods. So everyone can attend that if you're gonna be there. And the
Yes.
second one is related to the research pipeline. So in the last slide, we talk about how you jump from different projects to like have a fresh ideas. And what approach would you recommend for starting new projects? Because we only have limited time, we cannot like do everything we want. So how would you recommend for starting new project and building a strong research pipeline and set up successful tenure track journey?
Yeah, I think one thing to consider is quality over quantity. Okay. And that doesn't mean that every single thing you do has to go into one of the top 4 journals. At least this is not my personal philosophy as a scholar. But what this means is you only have a limited amount of mind space and time. And so it is important to use that valuable resource toward, at this stage, moving forward your dissertation. I can tell you, just lay my heart on the table here for you guys. I published my dissertation paper very early, right before I started my first job. I was so thrilled about that. It was wonderful. And I didn't publish, I got a lot of rejections for the next 2.5 years after that and did not publish one more thing. And I tell you that because, when you look now and you're like, oh, you have so many papers, and it's like, well, this is just a matter of time. I've been at this quite a few years now. But knowing that, I went through several years of getting rejections and, just finding how to rework the papers by working with senior mentors, it just took time. And so as long as you keep at it, it will be fine. With that said, one of the mistakes I made very early on when I was getting all these rejections was every time I get rejected, I would be thinking like, oh, that's not good. I should start something new, So I would still have the feedback from the paper that was rejected and I would be working on that. But then I would be thinking, oh, but maybe this is not so good. So maybe I should start another project. And what happens is it's too many. And so that was a mistake that I made. And what I would suggest instead is when you get that feedback, it is important to work with someone with more experience and ask them, like, help me work through this feedback. Even if it's rejection feedback, it's so valuable. And how can I make this work better so that I can deliver a very strong submission to the next outlet? And I can tell you, for me, this has paid off. I had a paper that we had been working on for years with a doctoral student who I care about very much. I knew she would need this for her career. And after a few rounds, it got rejected at JCR. And I mean, we were crushed. And I'm mainly crushed for our student, like we want her to have this. But also crushed for us because we love the project. And so we took that feedback and reworked the paper and sent it to JMR. And one of the things that happened is at JCR, they were saying, a lot of this that you're doing, it doesn't seem realistic. You need more external validity. And so we took that to heart and we applied for an MSI grant, which I would strongly recommend for you guys to consider and familiarize yourself with. We were able to get some funding so that we could heighten that external validity. When we submitted the paper to JMR, one of the reviewers was very generous and actually said, I was a reviewer at JCR on this manuscript. Yes, the manuscript was rejected, but those authors took all of my feedback and made the paper better. And this is a greatly improved paper. And this was really crucial for a couple of reasons. One, it signaled to that reviewer that, there's still more work to be done, but they knew we would take it seriously. And two, it signaled to the rest of the review team, including the editor at the new journal, that, we were committed to doing what it would take. Like if we need to obtain a grant and in order to deliver higher quality work, if we needed to go back into the literature and strengthen our theorizing, that we would be willing to take those steps. And I think that that's wasn't the whole picture, but that was an important piece of navigating that review process.
If I understand correctly, it means that we should commit to what we have right now and then try to build the quality of that work instead of constantly thinking, okay, this doesn't work, and go for the new one, go for the new one.
I think that's right. And I also think like some of the wisdom that I got very early on is to focus on the thing that's closest to publication. You know, so having a paper, I mean, obviously, if it's a revision, but even if it's a rejected paper and your senior colleagues still think that there is some promise in that idea, like if the review process says, sorry, there's no contribution, there's another paper that's now come out that's done this, okay, that's a little bit more challenging. But if your senior team is saying, yeah, you know, we can still proceed, then I would strongly recommend focusing on that because even a rejected paper is closer to publication than starting an idea from scratch because you spent years learning that part of the literature.
I see. So we can move to the next one. I think in your presentation, you also like touch point here a little bit. So the next one is, how can I ensure that the topic I choose can generate impactful or relevant research even after a couple of years? And what is the best plan to keep learning during my busy dissertation project and how to stay fresh?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that was surprising to me in my PhD journey is, you know, I was spending so much time on my dissertation, meeting week after week after week with my advisors over years. And finally, when I got to the point where I was about to start applying for the job market, my advisors were like, well, you know, you're now one of the experts in the world on this topic. And I was kind of like, whoa, what? Like, no, me, like little me, how am I, you know? But it's the truth. And so I think that, especially with your dissertation, if you're continually reading, not only are you staying fresh on your topic, but you're actually shaping yourself to be really one of the experts in the world on the thing that you're focused on for your dissertation. And so that kind of makes it even more crucial to stay current, not just with the literature, but also by looking in the popular press, by you know, talking to people who are managers in the area that you're interested in. I'm a consumer behavior, so talking to consumers, you know, striking up a conversation with someone in the grocery if it's related to your topic. I think all of those are ways that we can kind of stay fresh. And in terms of making sure you make an impact and that impact spans over years, I think that figure that came from the paper that I cited in my earlier presentation is really key to that. And that is the scientific community is one really important audience, but also making sure that you're having this conversation with these other stakeholders, with communities, with consumers, with policy, with organizations, to understand how the work you're doing can help improve, you know, their outcomes, whether it's their quality of life, whether it's their managerial outcomes. And when you're doing that up front, inevitably that will be impactful because you have those perspectives.
Thank you very much. And I think somehow you already answered some of the question from how to handle rejection. So due to the time limit, we'll move on a very important topic. We're dealing with our advisor and then getting guidance from advisor every day. So the first question about this is, as a new PhD student, like determining direction, I question about following my own curiosity and interest versus focusing on the direction most likely to please my advisors, which may lead to like higher possibility of the publication. So how to balance advisors' green light and being independent to carry the project forward?
Yeah, I think this is a good question because your advisor is going to have their own body of work and quite a lot of expertise in the area that they're focused in. But keep in mind that most advisors, most academics get into this career because they are intellectually curious at the same time. So I think the challenge is to find ways to make a case to your committee that this is worth their time. That it might even require that they do some extra reading as well. I was really fortunate. I mean, I had a wonderfully supportive, kind, and really bright team of committee members. The things that I was interested in my dissertation were not their areas at the time. I was really doing more consumer-based strategy because that was sort of my background and my passion, where my advisor's background was BDT. And so I needed to come to him and make a case through my preparation, through showing him why the questions I was interested in would be impactful to get him on board, to say, okay, this isn't like my normal thing that I do, but what he could do is still bring the rigor of, his vast body of knowledge and vast body of work to help me make my ideas as strong as possible. So I think that that is part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is at the same time beneficial to lean into what the advisor knows,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just such a generous thing when I think about my own committee and, their willingness to basically invest time to elevate my research, And so I tried to approach that relationship with a lot of humility and say, you know, I just don't know it all. So when they're telling me things, there's probably good reason behind it. And as I build a closer relationship with them over the years, that certainly became more and more evident.
I see. Thank you. And then the next one. So, how can I find mentors alongside my advisor? And is it ethical to discuss my PhD research project with a mentor without notifying my PhD advisor?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if ethical is the word that I would use. I don't know if it's unethical to talk about your research. I think that's part of our job is we need to be talking about our research, kind of to anybody who will listen, to get their reactions. I do think it's beneficial to have a wide network. I certainly had a very broad community of senior mentors who all were supporting me in different kinds of ways. Some of those were my assigned advisors who were really central, but there were also many other people that I met at conferences who were just generous humans, like had a chance to meet Poonam Keller early on at a conference, and she really wanted to hear about my work and hear about how I was progressing in my program. Some of the faculty through the PhD project and through the transformative consumer research community, through Society for Consumer Psychology. As you meet these faculty members, these are folks that, as you build a relationship, are going to want to help. And so I think it's fine to let your advisor know, like, I met this wonderful person. They offered to read my working paper submission before I send it to SCP. Is that okay with you? And probably the advisor will be like, thank you for doing that because, that means we get another set of eyes on the project. So I think there isn't a lot of downside to new relationships as long as it isn't taking away from you advancing your dissertation. So I think it's one thing to talk about your research project. I think the only red flag I would say is if you're starting a new project, this I would probably run by your advisor, because your advisor is likely going to want to know that you're doing what you can to make sure you can finish your program on time. And if you get distracted in too many different areas, that could be risky.
I see. So conference would be a good place to find mentorship outside the PhD programs. What about finding co-authors as a very like doctoral student and also junior faculty?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a PhD student, I think this is a personal preference. Um, for me, as an advisor, and when I was a student, I really looked to my advisor for guidance with that, to determine, what's going to make sense given my workload. For me, how I pick co-authors at this stage in my life is I like to be aligned in terms of work style, meaning, you may have friends that, you love very much, but if you have different reward systems, for example, if you're at different types of institutions, and those two schools are going to reward different things, if it's two assistant professors, then it's going to be hard to work together. Because if one school, is recognizing maybe a broader set of journals than the other, then it's going to be hard for everybody to get the outcomes they want in that relationship. But assuming you have the same goal in terms of target journal, and you feel that you have compatible work styles, I think the other thing is to make sure you have complementary skills. So meaning if you there are three co-authors or potential co-authors, and they all have the same dissertation committee, they were all trained the same way, then there isn't going to be a lot of diversity of thought in approaching questions. And so it might be much more beneficial to have someone who has a different set of training as you build your team. And so I think considering relationship quality, trust, diversity of background, and bandwidth are the things that I would think about when building out this co-author community. And also realize that it's such a long career. There's time. There's time for that. You can always start to build the relationships. And once you've gotten your dissertation published, you can start to build out some of these relationships in a more tangible way. But again, this is all subjective. This is how I did it and how I would recommend others do it. But I think, this is the beauty of this job. It's all very self-directed, and we get to a great degree, approach it in the way that is best for our situation.
I see. Thank you very much. And the last topic we move on is about well-being. And because we have 5 more minutes about this webinar, we want to respect everyone's time. So I'm gonna raise a question in a high level to like kind of summarize every questions together. So we have so many things in our hand, and then we only have limited time, and then we also want to have a life outside of all of this work. So how can we balance everything together?
It's difficult. And I want to start by saying, I see that and I know that. And I think it's important to find friend groups who are going through the same thing, because people who are not in this discipline sometimes, don't really have a good handle on how we spend our time, what we're doing. Early on, I had friends who were like, "Oh, you're only teaching on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so you're off." And I'm, sort of like, no, that's not off. And so part of it was giving an education, but it was also these people who are sort of in my generation in the field, who I sort of grew up with. Like in my case, it was, people like Karen Winterick and Kelly Hawes, and we all kind of came through this path together. And just knowing that they're going to get it, and so having that support system who will tell you, like, it really is okay for you to go to yoga 3 times a week. And in fact, maybe it's better than okay. Maybe you really should be doing that because perhaps your work would be even better if you set aside time to take care of your body, your heart, and your mind. So I think, like, for me, it's relationships. It's about having that supportive friend group to push you to take care of yourself when you're tempted to just keep sitting at the desk.
Thank you very much for this insight. Like sometimes I got comments from my friends who are in industry right now saying that, Xiaoying, you're still studying right now, or like when you are she was asking me whether I want to play tennis stuff, and I said no, I need to study. So that's a good point about like building the balance and relationship. So thank you for answering so many questions, and thank you for all the questions submitted. And right now I will pass to Ishita to kind of like have a nice conclusion for us.
Thank you so much, Professor Moira Scott, for your insights. This is really invaluable. I hope you are all leaving today a little bit more inspired, grounded, and reminded why our PhD journeys matters. It's very important. The work that we do is much more meaningful than any other field. So thank you so much, Professor Moira Scott, for your insights. We do have a few quick announcements. Currently, we are running DocSIG engagement and feedback survey. Some of you might have seen on our LinkedIn. If you haven't filled it yet, please take out 10 minutes and fill out the survey, because we don't want to make any intuitive decisions at DocSIG. We want to make data-driven decisions. It not only makes DocSIG stronger, but it also shapes our programming for webinars. Winter AMA, which is in Spain, it's international for the very first time. And summer AMA is going to be Denver, a very different location. They have never been to Denver before. So please take out the time and let us know how we are doing and how we can improve. Second is our DocSIG JMR Scholarly Insights. We have just launched our October issue. So if you have not got a chance to see, please sign up for an article. This is a great opportunity to read articles beyond your own research topics, and then your blog posts get published at AMA website. Deadline for both the initiatives is Tuesday, September 30th. So please try to participate in both, or at least one of our initiatives. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of you to join. Until next time, please take care, and thank you again from all of us at AMA DocSIG. We will see you soon in our next webinar. We are launching a new series. More updates will be given through our LinkedIn. So stay tuned. Bye. Thank you.